I want to know what's the strangest thing you have in your house.
Yeah, hold on a sec. So this is actually something that my wife desperately felt she needed, and I absolutely agree. And it's a box of teeth.
This is Box of Teeth, chewing over the stories behind the books. With our guest,
Zen Cho.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Zen Cho, your newest book is Blackwaters Sister, which I've got sitting right here, which is out now, and which was in our June Booksellers Dozen as well.
Awesome. Oh, lovely, thank you.
So could you just give us a brief idea of what it's about, sum it up in maybe one sentence for us?
So it's a Malaysian set contemporary fantasy about a young woman who starts hearing the voice of a ghost in her head, and it turns out to be the voice of her estranged dead grandmother, basically.
Nice. Well, that runs straight into my next question then, which is, what genre do you define it as? Because we have urban fantasy sort of like batted around, but it's not really, is it?
I hate this question because I just wrote the book. I figured that the job of categorizing it is someone else's. I guess I would call it like a family drama with ghosts and gods.
Yeah, no, that's an accurate description. Your previous work, I think what we've settled on it in the shop, and you can tell me if it's wrong if you don't feel like it suits, but Sorcerer to the Crown and the True Queen, we tend to define to people as fantasy regency romance. So how different was it then writing something contemporary after those?
Pretty different, but I felt up to something new. I think having spent a few years in the Regency era with research and writing and revisions and all that, I kind of felt like a break. And so it was kind of refreshing moving to 21st century.
So were you reading a lot of Regency stuff as a kid or as an adult even that was informing that when you were writing those?
Absolutely, yeah. So I describe Sorcerer and True Queen as Jane Austen with dragons, and people of color, actually. So, and I read a lot of kind of Jane Austen, kind of right around that era. Georgette Hare is a big influence on the book. She obviously writes these great Regency romances, and when I was writing them as well, I made sure to read a lot of letters from that period. So I read the memoirs of Harriet Wilson, who was a kind of courtesan, and she kind of, one of her clients was the Duke of Wellington. She's extremely funny, and she wrote this tell-all and basically sent it to all her lovers and kind of demanded money if they wanted to be taken out the book. And I think the Duke of Wellington said "F you," so he stayed in the book. Very, very entertaining stuff. But yeah, so it was kind of like, it was like business but fun as well. Just reading all that stuff to kind of make sure that kind of informed the tone of the books.
What were you reading when you were writing this one then?
Well, I didn't really have to read anything, I guess, in order to maintain the tone. I think with Sorcerer and True Queen, because I was deliberately using a kind of archaic voice for them, I had to try to stay in the voice, whereas Blackwaters Sister is written in a very much, well, it's just written in a version of my own voice, in a fairly kind of slangy, kind of millennial kind of tone. And so I didn't really need to, I was just reading whatever took my interest, really.
That's quite nice, though. What is the closest book you have to hand at the moment?
It's either Mr. Tumble's sticker magazine, which thank goodness that's not the only one. Not for me, I've got a 2-year-old. It's The Absolute Book by Elizabeth Knox.
Awesome. Have you read it?
So I'm partway through. So
awesome.
I'm really enjoying it. It's really, really good.
Nice. Usually when I ask people that, they say, no, I haven't read it yet, but it sounds good. There is actually like a huge focus on language and languages in the book. And it opens with a line where the first clue we get as a reader that the voice in Jess's head isn't herself, is that she doesn't know one of the words used. And I wanted to know whether you have a favorite word, and if so, whether it's in the novel.
That's a really good question. I think specifically in the context of, so the word that the protagonist doesn't know is bangkit, which is a Malay word, and actually I'm not going to explain what it means because it gets explained in the first scene. But Malaysian English is used quite a lot in Blackwaters Sister. It obviously borrows a lot from kind of other languages like Malay and Chinese, and so it's quite mixed. And in terms of Malaysian English, one of my favorite words from is abuden, and I don't really know the etymology of it, but it kind of means like duh or obviously. So if you're kind of being asked like, oh, you feeling a bit tired today? It's like abuden, I worked all day, like so it's a bit grumpy, but I just find it really funny.
Do you remember where the idea for the book came from?
I do. So there are actually kind of two sources, and this links into Sorcerer to the Crown. So when I was writing Sorcerer to the Crown and True Queen, I spent a lot of time on the Oxford English Dictionary website, OED Online, just like looking up old words, because I was writing in this archaic tone, and I wanted all these like obscure old words. I thought they would give the readers kind of a feeling of entering a different world, not just a historical world, but a magical one. And I came across this word hag-ridden, which is literally hag as in witch, and then ridden as in, it's riding you around. And it basically means stressed. But it also has a literal meaning of, being ridden around by a witch or being cursed by a witch. And it just immediately gave me this really vivid image of a young woman being ridden around by her horrible relatives, basically her horrible ancestors, who are obviously ghosts. And so I had that idea, the kind of spark of an idea for a story, and the kind of rest of the idea came when I read a book called The Way That Lives in the Heart, which is by a Canadian anthropologist called Jean D. Bernardi. Actually, I don't know if she's Canadian, but she is based in Canada. And she went to Penang, which is where the book is set, Blackwaters Sister is set, in Malaysia in the 1980s, and she did field research there into Chinese popular religion, and particularly this practice of spirit mediumship, where a spirit medium will invite a god to possess them. And I just found that book really, really interesting, because what it did was give me an intellectual framework for these religious beliefs and traditions that I'd grown up around, but were never really explained to me. My parents were very, very superstitious, and everything was so taboo. So we'd go to the temple, they'd kind of tell me what to do, but they wouldn't explain why I was doing it. And so just getting that understanding of the story, the book was just so rich with kind of incident and anecdote, and it was just really interesting. And I just thought, oh, there's definitely a novel in there. And so the kind of two ideas combined to make Blackwaters Sister.
Fab. And you mentioned Penang as well, and I was wondering, because obviously with Sorcerer to the Crown, we can visit London, we can't visit Fairyland. How much of Penang in the book is fictionalized, and how much of it is like places that you've been and could visit?
It's pretty faithful to Penang, I would say. Like, Jess, for example, goes to a hipster cafe, which is based on a real hipster cafe that you can go to. It's called China House. It wasn't founded by the son of a gangster, unlike the book. It was founded by an Australian couple, I think. But it's a really cool cafe, and it's made from kind of three old shop houses that have been knocked down and kind of not knocked down, sorry, the intervening walls have been knocked down and they've been converted. And it hosts lots of cool events and stuff. Another major location in the book is the Garden Temple, which is the Blackwaters Sisters temple, and it's kind of the linchpin of the conflict, because Jess's dead grandmother is mad because a business magnate / gangster boss is going to develop that area, going to raise the temple. And that again is inspired by a real place, although not one that I visited. In the book that I mentioned, Way That Lives in the Heart, the author visits what she calls a shrine grotto, so a temple in a garden, and it has these, and she features these pictures of these altars and trees, very atmospheric. But that was bulldozed, I think, years ago, maybe in the 90s. So there's no sign of that today. I've never had the chance to visit, and in fact, I've never been able to find out anything more about it. But that was inspired, I guess, by a real location. So yeah, it's reasonably close to Penang, but just fictionalized just enough to have a little bit of distance from the truth.
So do you have a writing desk, or do you write anywhere and everywhere? Or
so I do have I'm fortunate enough to have a study, so I have a proper desk. But I quite like sort of sitting in the sofa and with my laptop in my lap writing, even though I know that's really like ergonomically bad for you. My back will reproach me in later years, but I just find it quite comfy.
When you do use your desk, do you have anything non-writing related on it?
Probably the most interesting, I've got some stuff on the windowsill in front of my desk. So I've got I won a Hugo Award, so I've got the Hugo Award there. I've got a pandan plant, which is a kind of fragrant grass that we use in cooking in Southeast Asia a lot. So I'm growing a pandan plant. It just happens to be there because it's one of the best lit places in the house, and the plants need a lot of, because they're tropical plants, so they need a lot of sunshine and humidity. And then I have a daruma, which is a kind of like a Japanese like kind of doll thing. They're like red. They've got like really big round eyes, and they come with like one eye, and then the other one isn't filled. It's like blank. And the idea is that you make a wish with the daruma, and then when the wish comes true, you fill in the other eye. And my daruma has both eyes filled in because I got it, I don't know, some kind of like Japan themed event at like my work years ago, before I published my first novel, and my dream was to have a novel published. So when Sorcerer to the Crown came out, I filled in the eye. So I've got that there to kind of, I guess, give me hope when the writing gets hard.
That's so lovely. I love that. Fab. So classic box of teeth question. What's the weirdest thing that you have in your house?
This is quite like a box of teeth, I guess. And I'm not totally sure I know where it is. So I'm not going to rush off and find it. And also, you might not want to see it because it's a bit gross. But what I have is my son's you know, the thing that comes out of your belly button when you're a baby. Like,
oh,
what's it called?
You still have that?
What? No, but what's it called? I forgot. I'm completely blanking on the word.
Oh, the umbilical cord.
Yes, that's the word.
I thought you meant the placenta itself. I was like,
no, the placenta itself. I'm so red because I'm just like so embarrassed I've forgotten the word umbilical cord. Yeah. So I've got his umbilical cord, not his placenta. I did not retain the placenta, eat it, bury it. I didn't do any of those things. That's lost to history. It was disposed of in the hospital. I do have his umbilical cord because when you take the baby home, it still has the umbilical cord attached to it, and then slowly it dries off and it drops off. And my mom told me to save it in a red packet, the same red packet that one uses at Lunar New Year to give money in. I don't know why. She just made me do it. It's like a tradition. And she said if I have other children, what I should then do is save their umbilical cords and put it in the same red packet, and that will mean that the children will be close to each other.
Aw, that's a nice concept.
Yeah, I mean it probably won't work, but it makes no real sense. But anyway, so I've got that somewhere. That's probably the weirdest thing I have.
What's the weirdest thing that you've done when researching your books?
The stuff I've done for research has been so anodyne though. Like I made a big Excel spreadsheet of like stuff that they ate in the Regency. It's literally like white soup, like, you know, like I don't know what's in white soup. It sounds very Regency, you know, cold souse, you know, that kind of thing. I suppose the weirdest thing is like when you are describing like maybe an action scene or something, and you start kind of, you're like, oh, actually, you know, describing all the like limbs, is this actually possible? And then you start rolling around the floor trying to play it out, you know, that's probably the funniest thing like one does.
I feel like you're probably not the only writer that does that.
No, definitely not.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for having me.
Run, 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 kangaroo, oh, chin, chin, run, run.